MS Now White House reporter Laura Barón-Lopez is in Beijing covering the summit. Also with us, MS Now international affairs analyst, former U.S. ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, and Shihoko Goto of the Foreign Policy Research Institute. Thanks you all for joining us. Laura, starting with you, the two leaders met today amid the backdrop of the war with Iran, of course, global economic uncertainty. What did they discuss?
Yeah, Ariel. So there are the very public statements and toasts of friendship between the two leaders that we saw over the course of this long first day of the summit. The president repeatedly praising Xi Jinping, calling him a friend multiple times, saying that he was a great leader and that he is very eager and happy to work with him, especially on economic issues and when it comes to the business leaders that he brought along with him. But then there are also the very real private tensions that you referenced that played out behind closed doors in a bilateral meeting today that lasted nearly 2 hours. But first, I want to just play a little bit of what the president had to say about Xi Jinping at the state banquet, which was the final event for the two of them today. Take a listen.
This is a great honor. It was a fantastic day. And in particular, I want to thank President Xi, my friend, for this magnificent welcome. It is my honor to extend an invitation to you and Madam Peng to visit us at the White House this September 24th, and we look forward to it. And I'd now like to raise a glass and propose a toast to the rich and enduring ties between the American and Chinese people. It's a very special relationship.
But again, behind closed doors, there were real tensions. I mean, this summit has come down to the issue of Taiwanese independence as well as the ongoing Iran war. And when we saw the dueling readouts come out about the meetings, a White House official not mentioning Taiwan at all and only focusing on Iran. And we haven't been able to get an answer from the White House about what exactly the president said to Xi when she confronted him about Taiwan independence.
And there will be so many eyes looking to see exactly what was said behind closed doors. Ambassador, in his remarks, President Xi said that he hoped the two countries could avoid the so-called Thucydides trap. It's a historic reference about a great power being threatened by the rise of another. Trump struck a bit more of a public, at least, cordial, flattering tone in his comments. What do you make of the posture, both in private and in public, of these two leaders, and how should we be reading all of this?
Well, to figure out what happened in private, we're going to have to get better readouts than we have so far. To date, they're just pretty pablum. They're very stock phrases, nothing new in my mind, either from President Xi or President Trump. What's striking to me about the public remarks is just how effusive President Trump was in calling the chairman of the Communist Party of China a dictator, an autocrat, his friend. He just kept using the phrase friend, friend, friend. He's a great leader, great leader, great leader. Chairman Xi Jinping said nothing but reciprocal to President Trump. To the best of my mind, and lest I missed it, I never heard him call the president his friend. I never heard him call a great leader. And that asymmetry, I think, is striking. I think that's a position of weakness, frankly, from the president. It's not necessary. You have to meet with Xi Jinping and manage the relationship. And I think that's the way this summit will be remembered, a kind of non-event, right? There's not going to be any breakthrough moments. But this asymmetry of praise is striking to me, unprecedented, I would say.
Shihoko, you know, Xi did say that both leaders believe that Chinese-U.S. relations were the most important bilateral ties in the world and that the countries should be partners rather than rivals. That sounds on its surface like it's significant. But based on the Chinese readout of the closed-door meetings, as we've been discussing, he also had that stark warning about the U.S. position on Taiwan, saying if it is not handled properly, quote, the two countries will have clashes and even conflicts. The U.S. side must exercise extra caution in handling the Taiwan question. So not mincing words there. How carefully does Trump need to navigate the issue of Taiwan as he's also looking to achieve some of these business deals and, of course, get Xi's cooperation on Iran?
Right. Well, both countries, they represent the two biggest economies in the world. it's a G2 summit. Both countries are united in the fact that they do want stable relationships and neither want to go to war. However, the challenge is always going to be that President Trump wants to have a big win coming out of this. China can play the long game when it comes to economic relations. It can play the long game when it comes to Taiwan as well. It has kept an eye on the prize. China wants to challenge the United States to become the biggest economy in the world, especially when it comes to dominating in advanced technology. And it is also not going to give up on its ambitions to absorb Taiwan either as well. But for President Trump, what he really needs, given the political landscape that he is in at the moment, ahead of the midterm elections, he will want to come back with something tangible. So there are expectations, especially on the economic front, for Trump to come up with a deal. So what we're talking about are the three Bs, Boeing, beef, and soybeans. And that if China were prepared to buy these three hot items, U.S. agriculture, U.S. technology, and aviation equipment, and soybeans in particular, then Trump can go home and say this is a big win. However, when you look at it from a U.S. perspective, playing the long game, what the United States wants to do is to remain a economic dominant power, especially when it comes to advanced technology. It has to be very careful about letting China have access to semiconductors, especially advanced semiconductor equipment. And at the same time, we are having this big delegation of U.S. corporate executives, including the head of NVIDIA and Qualcomm and Apple into the mix. And they also want to have a deal with China, which could often be a near-term win and not a strategic game for the United States.
So, Laura, take us behind the curtain of those conversations that are happening with top business leaders there. What have you learned about that?
Well, so far, again, to the ambassador's point, we haven't seen any major breakthroughs from these meetings. And we did get a little bit of reaction from Elon Musk as he was coming out of those meetings, as well as NVIDIA's CEO. And they essentially said that they were productive meetings with the Chinese officials, as well as they said that NVIDIA CEO said that both Trump and Xi Jinping were incredible leaders. But again, there have been no details about an actual deal with any of these companies to get more access to the Chinese markets. And even if there were a deal, say in the case of NVIDIA, where they would maybe get more access to the Chinese markets for their computer chips that are big in the AI boom. I was talking to a Trump ally today who is saying that that's not necessarily something that voters back home will see as a win for themselves as their pocketbooks are being pinched, and that it would really take some kind of an agreement with China when it comes to getting their help to reopen the Strait of Hormuz that would actually move voter sentiment. But again, across the board, we haven't seen any tangible agreements come out of the meeting so far. And tomorrow, the president is going to have more meetings with Xi Jinping, including a tea and a lunch, Ariel.
All right. So on another front, Ambassador, with Trump in China, Russia has now unleashed its biggest aerial assault ever on Ukraine. 2 days of deadly strikes that included more than 1,500 drones and dozens of missiles. Trump has in the war in Iran. Do America's adversaries see an opening right now?
Well, yes. I mean, it's striking in the readout. Again, maybe we'll find out more details later. But so far, we've seen no assistance from Xi Jinping to help us end the war in Iran. Xi Jinping is an ally of Vladimir Putin. He provides all kinds of technologies to the Russians. They buy their oil and gas to prop up their economy. And again, maybe it happened privately, but we've seen nothing in the public domain that they even talked about the war in Ukraine. Most certainly, it does not look like President Trump got any kind of agreement from China to help with either Iran or Russia. And that, again, is what's striking. The words are all nice, lots of nice exchanges and pleasantries, but the deliverables from this summit are very, very thin. In fact, so far, I'd say there's no deliverables.
Ambassador, I'd love your thoughts on this, and then Chihoko, I want you to chime in on this as well. 3 U.S. officials tell MS Now there's concern private Chinese military companies are considering selling arms to Iran. Officials say it's not clear whether those shipments have been made or to what extent the Chinese government may be behind the scenes approving these sales. Would this happen without Beijing's sign-off? And does Trump have any leverage to pressure Xi to stop this kind of behavior?
Well, first of all, it would not happen without Xi Jinping signing off. This is an autocracy. This is not a democracy. This is not a free marketplace, especially when it comes to military sales. But if you want to get that kind of cooperation, if you want to get that, you have to negotiate. You have to sometimes even coercively negotiate. And what is striking to me is that President Trump just thinks a good meeting is the goal of his trip to China. And rather than thinking about what will help the American people, what will help American soldiers, so far these kind of concrete outcomes that typically are part of major summits have been very, very thin. And now there's one more day of negotiations to go. Maybe there'll be some big breakthroughs. But I'm struck how much of this is about pageantry, not about substance of importance to the American people.